All right, so I'm going to go through the general procedure for the chromatography lab because some of these steps, even though they're written out, are a little difficult to figure out just by the written instructions. So you're going to need some different supplies. Some of them are in your kit. So you're going to need the chromatography strips, which are in a folded piece of paper. So if you unfold that, you're going to find six strips of paper that look like this. They're going to be about the same length. They may be slightly different lengths, but they're going to be about the same length. They're in that paper just to keep them from getting damaged. And you're going to find a pipette. So you should have a couple of these big plastic eyedroppers. You're going to need one of those. And you're also going to need your ruler out of your kit. So we did include a paper ruler just in case people didn't have a ruler at home. So it's the little folded up paper ruler. And you can use this one if you have a small metric ruler around. You can use that if you've got it, but it does need to be metric because you're going to do your measurements in metric. Other things you're going to need, you can see there on the list if you've got the chromatography lab open. You're going to need a mixing container, aka a glass or a cup. I've already got my salt water in here, so you're going to need about a cup of warm water. So that's what the measuring cups are for. You're going to need some salt. So mine's already actually mixed up. Oh, that would be my M&Ms being done. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. So that's another thing you are going to need. You're going to need M&Ms. Now in the directions and in the list it says a small plate or a paper towel. And after doing some testing, I actually found that the best way to do this is actually to use a plate. So if you look down here, I've got my little plate with my M&Ms on it, and I've actually already put drops of water on it. That's what the timer was for. And so if you look underneath of it, instead of putting the drops on top, I put the drops underneath, and I'll show you what that's for here in a little bit. So you're going to need those items. You are also going to need a larger cup. So you're going to need a cup about this size. It says 15 centimeters. It needs to be big enough for those strips to be able to stand in and still have space above. You're also going to need some sort of covering for that cup. So I've got a Ziploc bag that I happen to have around. Plastic wrap, foil, any of that stuff that's listed there will work. And you're going to need a pencil. It has to be a pencil because pens will actually work through the chromatography and your marks will disappear. So you need a pencil. I've got a mechanical pencil, standard number 2 pencil. Any one of them will work. And you're also going to need some toothpicks. So they can be the standard pointed toothpicks like these ones. They can be flat toothpicks. It doesn't matter, just as long as you have some toothpicks. And the calculator you'll need just when you go to do the calculations for the lab. So first thing, obviously, in the directions is to select your M&Ms. So you need one of each color. And you will find that there are different numbers of each color. That's actually on purpose. M&Ms does actually put more of certain colors in based on people's preferences. Now, you want to put those drops of water on. So like I said, I found that actually, even though it says to put the drop on top, it works best if you put them on a plate and then let that water go underneath and get a nice big fat drop of color. So you can see the color has dissolved from underneath of that M&M, and you have a nice big fat drop of color. We want that dye to be able to do the chromatography with. While this is going on, while this is sitting, because this takes about 10 minutes, what you can do is you can get your developing chamber set up. So that's what the big cup is for. You're going to take your big cup and you're going to mix up your salt water. So the directions are there in the lab for that. Then you're going to put a centimeter of the salt water into your cup. And I'm going to use a different ruler because it's just a little easier to do while I'm working on the camera. And when you do your measurement, you might be able to see in the video here, my cup actually has a decently thick base. You want to make sure that you measure from the inside of the cup up for the measurement. So make sure when you're pouring your water that you're making that measurement from the inside of the cup and not the outside bottom of the cup. All right, that looks good. I probably have a little too much. You do want it as close to a centimeter as possible, and that's that number 1 on the metric side of your ruler. All right, that's a little bit better. And just like the directions say, you want this cup to have as flat of a bottom as possible because your chromatography strips are going to stand on that. So you've got your salt solution now in your cup. You're going to go ahead and put your plastic wrap, your Ziploc bag, whatever it is, on top, so that way we can start building up water vapor in there. So you can set that aside. You can also prepare your chromatography strips. So mine have been practiced with, so you'll see that mine already have some dye and stuff on them. But I'll show you on the back side, so you'll be able to see some color dots on them. Yours will be blank. When you handle the chromatography strips, you want to hold them by the edges, as the directions say, because the chromatography, as the intro described, it works by the dye being carried by the water and the salt water and being attracted to the paper. However, those dyes are going to be much more attracted to the oils on your hands. You've probably noticed that before, that whenever you get dyes on your hand, they stay, and it's because they're attracted to the oils and to the membranes in your cells. So if you get oils on these strips, any dye that moves up the paper, when it hits an oil spot from your fingers, it's going to stop there and not keep going. And that will affect our results. So make sure you hold these by the edges. So you want to lay them down on a clean surface. You can always even just lay down the piece of paper that they came in. Actually, I'll probably do that because I've been doing stuff on my desk. So lay them out. Like I said, you can see the little ink dots on mine. And what you want to do is you need to make some marks on these. So again, I'm going to use my shorter ruler that I happen to have here. So you need to, this is what the pencil's for. You need to mark these at 1.5 centimeters from one of the ends. So there's 1.5. So I'm going to make a mark, and then you want to draw a straight line across at that 1.5 centimeter mark. That's going to be where the dye goes. So you can see when I was working before, that's where the dye dot will go. So I'm actually going to flip this around so that we can see that when I show you how to put on the dye. So there's the 1.5 centimeter mark. So draw a straight line. So this is going to be the starting line for the dye. So this is the end of the strip that's going to go in the water in your big cup. So you're going to do that to all of the different strips. You're going to label the strips 1 through 6. So you can label them wherever. If you want to label them down in the corner down here, you want to label them in the up corner, that's fine. So you'll label them 1 through 6, and then in your Word document, you're going to see it's labeled 1 through 6. Those are going to match the colors that you're going to put on them. So you just need to put in the table which color you put on which strip. So let me show you how you're going to put the colors on. So I've got my little tray of M&Ms here. So if I pick up that red M&M and tap it so that all of that nice color dye sits on the plate, you're going to take your toothpick, and what you want to do is pick up dye and bring it over to your strip, and we want to make a dot. Okay, so if you look at that, made a nice little dot. You want to blow on that. You want to get it dried out as much as you can, because we don't want to really hurt the paper. We don't want to dissolve it and break it down. Then after it dries, so if you want to go down, do the other ones, you can, or you can just do it one at a time. After it dries out some, come in, put in another dot. And as you keep putting more dots on, obviously it's going to take longer to dry. You want to do this probably about 4 times. You want this spot to be really visible. So this is really visible. The more I do it, the more you actually probably can see it on the video without me picking it up. But you don't want it very big. So the size that it is about the size you want it. You don't want it any bigger than that. So if it starts getting any bigger, then go ahead and stop. But generally, once you start putting it on, it doesn't get any bigger. So you can see that's really nice, clear color on the dot. That's 3. Now, before you go to the next part of the experiment, you want to make sure these are very, very dry. So you might want to wait, 5-10 minutes or blow on them. You can even get, if you want to get a little hair dryer or something, just make sure you don't blow them all over the place. Make sure they're super dry. You don't want the dye dots to be wet before you start the next part of the experiment. So once they are completely dry, you can start putting them in the developing chamber. So what that will look like, I can show you with one of the other strips that's done. So where did that one go? So there's my red one from earlier. So depending on the size of your cup, you might not be able to put all of your strips in at the same time. So you might have to do them in batches. So my chamber probably won't be able to hold all 6 of my strips. So what you want to do is take your strip after you uncover your chamber, and you want to make sure that the strips don't touch the sides of the beaker. Okay, it says beaker in your directions, the cup, and that they don't touch each other. Now, one of the things you can do to help with that is put like a little fold into the paper, but make sure that your dot is not on the fold. So you can see I'm doing that without really touching the paper, and that dot is on the other side of the fold there. So that way they'll stand up. And you can use like a pencil or your pipette to kind of help you make that fold. And then you're going to stand your paper. Okay. Up in the chamber. Of course, mine, because I want to do the video, isn't going to cooperate. So this is the big importance of having a flat bottom cup. There we go. So my cup would only actually let me process maybe 1 or 2 at a time. And that's okay. So what you're going to do once you get a couple of these, you're just going to let it sit. If I bring the camera in, let it go. There we go. You can actually see that my dot is starting to stretch out and the water is moving up the strip. Okay, that's what we want it to do, because the dye is going to travel up the strip. And in that first part of the directions, it talks about the distance that the dye travels will tell us basically what kind of dyes we're looking at. It'll also tell us if there's more than one dye in the color, because if it stretches out and there's two colors, then it'll actually show as two different dots. So two different colored dots will show up. So you're going to want to let them sit and just move up the strip until they're almost to the top. So about 2 centimeters, so about the same distance from the top as it is from the bottom where your line's at. It might take a while because it starts pretty quick at the bottom, but it takes, as you can notice, it slows down. And you do want to, I haven't put my Ziploc bag back over because it'll block the camera, but you do want to put your bag or your plastic wrap or whatever it is back over top, so that way it'll hold the water vapor in and help the process occur. Then once this is done, you're going to pull out the strips and put a line, a mark where the water is when you pull it out. That's the solvent front. And so you'll put a line there so you know where the water stopped when you pulled it out. You need that for your calculations. Then sit your strips aside because they need to completely dry out so that you're able to look at where the colors are and make your measurements that are described in the directions. And we'll have to wait for the miracle of video you'll see here shortly. And I can show you a little bit about how to do that once mine are done running. All right, so my strips aren't quite dry. These do take a while to dry, so if you want to, you can always take a blow dryer to them to help them speed up because the paper is quite thick. But before you do any work on them, you do need to let them dry completely because otherwise they tear very easily, and also it will be easier to see the pigments once they dry. So for example, you might be able to notice that it's easier to see the pigments on this red piece or on the paper from the red one than it is to see the pigments on this one. This is from the green M&M. The pigments aren't very bright right now on this one. So you want to make sure that they are completely dry before you do this next step. I did want to go ahead and show you before it got too late. I don't have my hair dryer or anything here at home. But what you're going to do for the next step is you're going to work on identifying the pigments that are on your strip and marking where the center of the pigment is or the most concentrated, brightest section is. So for example, on this strip with the red strip, the most concentrated section of it is right here. So I'll just make a little mark. On some of the strips, now I don't want to show you all of them because I don't want to ruin the surprise, but on some of them, and it's hard to see on this one possibly, but there may be more than one pigment. And so you'll need to decide how many pigments there are. This one actually has a couple pigments and one of them goes up quite a ways. So in this case, you can mark the highest point that the pigment goes, and then kind of pick the midpoint of the pigment string, because that pigment actually can travel quite a ways. And so you want to mark each pigment that you have show up on the strip. And you'll see in your table there are spaces for you to record multiple pigments. Then what you'll do is you'll take the measurement. You need to record a couple of measurements. One is the measurement from the starting point to the solvent front, so that line that you drew when you took the strips out. And then the second measurement, and this is the one for you that you'll do for each pigment that you defined, you'll take a measurement from here, the starting point, to that point that you've marked as where you've decided is kind of the middle or the darkest point for the pigment. And you should be able to notice from here, this dot did start here at the line. So this pigment, this red pigment did move. And you'll notice that they all move different distances. And if you look back at the background information, that is due to their size and their attraction to the paper. So we can use this to do different tests to figure out what kinds of pigments are in different materials. And like the handout says, for something like M&Ms, this is actually important because some of these dyes may be dangerous. For example, the one yellow dye is an allergen for some people. So then once you have those numbers, you can do the calculations that are in your worksheets. If you have any questions or run into any problems, feel free to email me, and have some fun doing some science with M&Ms. The other thing, if you'd like to try it, and you can get your hands on some rubbing alcohol, right now it's a little difficult. That's why I didn't have you do this experiment. But if you want, you can also do an experiment similar to this. Obviously, you won't have this chromatography paper, but you can also do this sort of an experiment with strips of coffee filters and different types of markers and pens. You can try it with your salt water, but also with rubbing alcohol, and see if you can get some similar types of results. So there are directions online for how to do that sort of thing if you're looking for another sort of activity to do. So yeah, good luck and have fun.